Leverdine, and today I want to share with you how I crocheted this simple witch hat. Now I crocheted this simple witch hat because the witch hat that I had previously was just falling apart on me and I needed a new one, but instead of buying a new one, I decided, hey, you know, I should just crochet myself one. So I crocheted myself one for fun, not thinking that I was going to make a tutorial or video on it, but then after I made it, I was like, this actually came out so cool, I think I do want to make a video on it so that others can recreate it. However, again, I did not film my step-by-step process. Plus, I used black yarn, so I mean, you wouldn't have really been able to see my stitches anyway because using black yarn is like really hard to see on camera, like what I'm doing. So I would need to make the hat all over again, but it did take me quite a long time to make this, and I don't want to make two witch hats. I don't need two witch hats. So what I'm going to do is actually scale it down a ton and use a lighter color yarn to show you the steps. But that being said, this is not going to be a step-by-step tutorial, but more of a guide on how to make this witch hat. And again, the steps are exactly the same, but what I'm going to be showing you is just a smaller version of the hat that I made, which works regardless because you could take these steps and make any size of witch hat that you want. Because again, these steps are the exact same. The only difference are the number of rows and stitches. But again, the steps are the exact same. You just customize it to whatever size that you want. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm using size 4 100% acrylic yarn. It's the same kind of yarn that I used for the black witch hat. It's just a different color. And I would suggest that you use a stiff, thicker yarn. That way it retains its shape as opposed to using a soft, thinner yarn because it'll probably be, again, softer and probably floppier. And for this kind of hat, you, again, want it to be stiff. So the first thing you're going to do is create a slip knot, then chain a chain that is long enough to wrap around your head or whatever head you're making this hat for. For this particular purple hat that I'm making for you guys, I am actually going to be using a little doll as a reference, so I'm only chaining 30 and that's able to wrap around the doll's head. But if you want to make a person-sized hat, I actually chained 80 for it to wrap around my head, but of course this number is going to be different for everybody, so just make sure that you chain enough chains so that it's able to wrap around your head. It's not too snug, but it just like fits just right. Like you don't want it too loose, you don't want it too tight. So yeah, once you're able to put the two ends together and they wrap around your head like this, that's when you know that you've chained enough chains. And for reference, here's my doll, my little baby Yoda. You're going to take your chain and wrap it around like this, and once it fits their head, then you're good to go. So from here, after you completed your number of chains, you're going to then go back on that chain with a single crochet. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a single crochet is, it is through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through the last two loops left on your hook. And again, a single crochet is through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through the last two loops left on your hook. Now, if you are a complete beginner to crochet, I would highly recommend that you first watch the Crocheting for Beginners video that I'll leave linked in the description box down below, and that covers all the basics for you to get started on learning how to crochet. And then after that, maybe try out some of my beginner-friendly tutorials, like my full-on actual step-by-step tutorials, before you watch something like this that's more of a guide, because it's going to be a little bit harder to follow as opposed to, again, step-by-step tutorials. But those are available on my channel if you want to check those out, and I'll leave them linked in the description box down below. But essentially you're going to make a whole row of single crochet until you get to the very end, and this is what your one row of single crochet should look like. And after you've completed that row of single crochet, you're going to bring the two ends together, and you're actually going to combine them, attach them to one another using a slip stitch, making sure that it's not twisted like it is right here. So I had accidentally attached the top portion of the row to the bottom portion of the other row, and that's why it's twisted. So make sure that, again, when you attach the two sides together, it's aligned so it's not twisted. Otherwise, your whole project's going to be all messed up. This is a very, very important part. Make sure that your base is not twisted. But yeah, once the ends are attached via slip stitch, then you're just going to continue making more and more rows of single crochet. But instead of going back and forth to complete a row, you're going to go around and around, and you'll know every time you complete a row, whenever you get back to the point where you attach the two ends together, that's like your starting and ending off point, and that's when you've completed a row and when you're going to start a new row. But yeah, all you're going to do is go around and around in a circle, making single crochets, going into every single stitch and just making single crochets, and you're just going to continue making rows and rows until this project is wide enough so that when you try it on, it covers your forehead. So obviously the one that I'm making right now is small, and Baby Yoda doesn't really have much of a forehead, so I'm only going to make 3 rows of single crochet. However, for an actual like person-sized hat, it should look something like this, and I did not count how many rows I made, so I don't know exactly how many I made for my hat, but I think I made around 25. Like I'm looking at it right now, I'm trying to count them, and it's around 25, like 25, 28 rows of single crochet, and that was enough for it to cover my forehead. And this is what it looks like. I did record the progress, and yes, I do look ridiculous, but hopefully that helps you out and gives you an idea of what it should look like at this point. So after you've made enough rows so that the project not only covers your forehead but also kind of sticks above your head, probably like an inch, then it's time to change it up. So from here we were just making 1 single crochet per stitch, but now we're actually going to start decreasing. So we're going to decrease by 3 every single row, and what that's going to do is start making the project a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller as we continue to make more and more rows, and in turn it will make the project pointy, which is exactly what we want. We want that pointy witch hat. So we're going to be skipping stitches. So you're going to be skipping a total of 3 stitches per row. Again, we want to decrease very slowly. That way it's not a drastic change, and it'll just get smaller and smaller, like little by little, as opposed to all at once. So in my little example here, all I really do is just choose a random stitch to skip. So I just like make some single crochets, and then I try to space them out evenly. You could definitely count them out and genuinely make them evenly spaced out, but I'm not someone who actually counts my stitches. I just go by feel, so that's why I'm just like, I just know that I skip 3 per row until I was happy with the size of my hat. And then I moved on to the next step, which is essentially just to decrease faster. But yeah, that's essentially what I did. I know this is a smaller scale, but again, the steps are exactly the same. I'm going to be skipping 3 stitches per row until I am happy with the size, and then I'm going to move on to the next step and just start making this hat smaller and smaller, faster and faster. So this is what my mini hat looks like just after a few rows of decreasing or skipping stitches. You could definitely see that it's getting smaller and smaller as we continue to make more and more rows. Again, it's going to be a very slight difference, especially when the hat is larger, but you should definitely be seeing that the rows are getting smaller and smaller because you're decreasing slowly. So it should look something like this, and when you try it on, it should look something like this. I showed my husband the progress, and he said I look like a lawn gnome. If this was red, I would totally look like one for sure. So now that we've finished crocheting the widest portion of the hat, it's time to start working on closing off the hat, but we're going to make sure that we take a really long time to close off the hat because you want the top of the hat not just to end, you want it to kind of extend for a decent amount, enough for it to curl if, again, you want the hat to look like mine. So what we're going to do is start decreasing more often. Now for my hat, what I would do is for 2 rows, I decreased every 8 stitches. So So I would make 8 single crochets, then I would skip a stitch, then make 8 single crochets, then skip a stitch, and so on and so forth for 2 rows. And then I would decrease every 6 stitches for the next 2 rows. So, and then after that, every 4 stitches for the next 2 rows, then every 2 stitches for the next 2 rows, and so on and so forth, until the top of the hat got skinnier and skinnier and skinnier to the point where the circle was only about like an inch wide. Then from there, I just elongated that skinny top by not decreasing anymore. So again, at this point, the project is only an inch wide, so it's probably only like 8 stitches total per row. So I just kept making 8 stitches total per row, just going around and around and around. Again, at this point, you are no longer decreasing, you're just extending the top portion. We're making that little curve at the top of the witch hat here. And it does look kind of funny, just making rows and rows of this tiny little circle. But in the end, that's what's going to make the hat nice and pointy and able to curve at the top. So again, I'm just going around and around and around this tiny little circle here. And what's funny is that this is about the same size as it would be on my normal sized witch hat too. So again, the steps are the exact same, making this tiny hat or a normal person-sized hat. So I'm just going around and around and around, making the same number of stitches until the top of the hat is probably about 8 inches. Well, I mean, for my normal size witch hat, it's about 8 inches, but for this little hat, probably like, how big is this? Maybe like 3 inches. Yeah, just going around and around and around in circles until I'm happy with the length of the project. This is what it looks like about halfway done. And now I'm just going to continue going around and around and around in circles until it can curve properly. And then I will close off the project by just continuing to decrease until there's 1 stitch left. And then I just close off the project. So I'm just going to continue extending this portion. And once I get to the end, and again, I'm starting to want to close off the project, that's when I'm going to start decreasing again. And I'm going to be skipping every other stitch. And eventually it will lead me to only having 1 more stitch. And then from there, I just close off the project. So I'm going to skip a stitch, crochet, skip a stitch, and so on, until the project is finally complete. And I'll go ahead and show you the full process of what that looks like, because it surprisingly takes a rather long time in order to close off the project like this. So like, you'd think at this point I'd be done, but no, there's still quite a number of rows I still need to make, going around and around and around, skipping stitches to close off this project, which is fine because again, I want the top to be rather long, but yeah, it takes a little bit. So I'm going to show you what it looks like at the very, very end. Oh, I'm almost there. Okay, how many more stitches am I going to need to do in order for this to close off finally? There we go, I think that's the last one. Oh, no, it was not the last one. Okay, now that's gotta be the last one. No, not yet. This one. No, oh my gosh. There we go. Okay, now it's complete. Yay! And now it has a little curve at the top. Perfect. So normally I would cut the yarn from the yarn ball right here, seal the project, but because I'm not going to actually make this hat for Baby Yoda, I'm just making this as an example. I'm going to unravel this little hat after this video. But again, normally, once you're done with this step, you're going to cut the yarn from the yarn ball and then seal the project. And now that we've made the top portion of the hat, this is the shape it is. It's like a little, looks like a little funnel. But now that we've completed the top portion, we are now going to work on the brim of the hat. So this is what the project we've been working on should look like when you try it on immediately, before you like curve it and make it into whatever shape you want. But anyway, now we're going to start to work on the brim, and I'm going to show you what it would have looked like if I made this video using the black yarn. you can't see anything. Maybe a little bit here and there. But anywho, I just want to show you that you go to the bottom of the hat and you attach your yarn, probably the same color as the color that you've been using. But for my little example, I'm actually going to use a different color so it's even easier for you to see. So again, use whatever technique method that you want to attach the yarn to the bottom of the hat. And then from here, we're going to make single crochets, but very important, instead of going through the two pieces right here that make a little V of the single crochet, we're only going to go through one. So again, single crochet, make this little V, right? And normally you would go through both of them. However, in this case, we're only going to go through the front one right there. And then we're going to make our single crochet. You see? So we are only going through this front portion of that single crochet and making single crochet within that. Normally we would go through both, and that's how you would normally go through a single crochet and make a single crochet. But for this one row, this first row, we're only going to go through one portion of that single crochet. So just that front portion of the single crochet. And that's just for one row. And what that's going to do is that's going to change the trajectory of the crochet project. So instead of continuing downward as it would if you didn't make this, make this row of single crochet, going into only one portion of the previous row of single crochet, then it would just continue downward like the rest of the project. But because we're doing this step, now all the stitches that you're going to make after this row are going to stick out sideways. And that's what we want the brim to do. We want it to stick out sideways and not just continue the hat downward. So again, you're going to make one row of single crochet, making sure that you only go into that specific portion of the previous row's single crochet, and that's going to be like the outer portion of it, the front portion of that single crochet. And once you've completed that row, then from there, that's when you could just do regular single crochet for the rest of the project. So just one row of this, sealing it off with a slip stitch, and boom, there is your one row of single crochet going into only one half of the previous row's single crochet. And you may not see a difference whatsoever with that first row, but after a few more rows of single crochet, you'll see that it changed the direction of which the stitches will be going. So from here, you're just going to continue making more rows of single crochet. However, instead of decreasing like we did before, we're actually going to increase the number of stitches per row. That way the brim could get bigger and bigger as you continue on. So for your second row, you're actually just going to make, just a normal row of single crochet going into every single stitch as you normally would. And after you've completed that row, for the third row, that's when you're going to start increasing. And what I mean by increasing is you're now going to add more stitches than the row previously had. So this is the pattern I did. I did 2 single crochets as you normally would, making 1 per stitch, but then I made 2 single crochets inside of 1 stitch. So it's 2 single crochets inside of 1 stitch. And then I made 2 single crochets as I normally would, and then 2 single crochets inside 1 stitch. And then again, 2 single crochets as I normally would, but then 2 single crochets inside 1 stitch. And then 2 single crochets as I normally would, then 2 single crochets inside 1 stitch. So obviously you're making more and more stitches per row by adding that extra stitch inside of 1 stitch. And you're going to continue this pattern for 1 row. So the whole second row, you're making those increases. And then once you've completed the second row and you're now going to work on the third row, you're just going to make a regular row of single crochet, as in just making 1 single crochet per stitch, no increasing. So the pattern from here on is going to be 2 regular single crochet rows and then a row where you increase. So you do the 2 single crochets and then 2 single crochets inside 1 stitch, and then 2 single crochets, and then 2 single crochets in 1 stitch, which is 1 row of that, and then 2 rows of regular, just full single crochet, no increasing, and then 1 row of increasing, and then 2 rows of no increasing, 1 row of increasing. You're just going to continue that pattern until you make your brim wider and wider, and you're happy with what it looks like. Now, if you want your brim to be less floppy, then don't increase as often. Maybe make 3 rows where it's just a normal single crochet row instead of 2 rows. So the less often that you increase, the less floppy or ruffled the brim will look, and then the more often that you increase, the more floppy and ruffled your brim will look. So just keep that in mind. Of course, you could change up the pattern as you wish, but just know that the more increases, the floppier and more ruffled the brim will be. The less increases, the less ruffled and floppy the brim will be. It'll be like straighter the less times you increase. So yeah, if you want like a really straight brim hat, then don't increase as often. Baby Yoda's hat is rather stiff because I didn't make as many rows where I increased, since it's just probably like 5 rows long. But for mine, it's a bit floppier because I had more chances to increase since I made up more rows. So this is my little progress of making my brim. So this is a couple rows in, a few more rows in, and then after I've completed about 35 rows, it's kind of hard to count the rows because of the dark color of the yarn, but I think it's about 35 rows for the brim. And this is the final result. I'm quite happy with how the witch hat turned out. And again, sorry for not making this a full-on tutorial, but I hope that this video does serve as a guide and a reference for you to be able to recreate a witch hat for yourself. Thank you so much for watching. If you love crochet, I share so many crochet related videos on my channel, so go ahead and check that out. I make actual like beginner friendly step-by-step crochet tutorials from again, beginner friendly to more advanced, and crochet with me, styling my crochet ideas, and so much more. So please go ahead and click that red subscribe button if you have not already, so I can see you next time. Bye, and have a magical day.